This is a video response to Twiggie087 in his video about paying your tithes to the church. I want to just give a little bit of insight because I think, since you said you were from a Catholic background, although I consider myself non-denominational, I call myself just basically a conservative Christian. I don't believe denominations should ever divide people into different groups as far as Christians go, just different flavors of the same thing. I am presently a Roman Catholic, attending a Catholic church. I'm an usher there, and also just in the last year I have been invited to join the finance board of my church, so I'm able to get a little bit more insight on finances, how they operate. And it's always been something kind of interesting to me too, because I just enjoy reading finances and reports and stuff like that. Although the operational part of it, going to the meetings, is kind of a pain in the butt. I've never liked business meetings, but I do like reading financial reports and seeing where money's going and everything. Now, as far as your first statement too, I would have to say I completely disagree with your first statement there about you think it's not right to give to a church. Now, I think any organization, I'm not even going to get into spiritual aspects of stuff. I'm just going to get into the nuts and bolts of running a church and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into, there's scripture that talks about tithing and spiritual blessings and stuff like that, but I don't think that's the line of thought you were on anyway, so I'm not going to respond to it that way. But when you belong to any organization, such as a club, they basically make you pay dues if you belong to some kind of a club, because they have to have the place where they meet, whether it be a clubhouse or rent space in another place or something like that. So there's just the costs of running the thing if people want to gather together to do anything in common, not necessarily religious. If you're a Moose Club, a Elks Club, something like that, Lions Club, there's necessary expenses. There's utilities like everything else, and churches are no different. They do get some tax breaks, but basically they still have the same bills that a lot of the rest of us have. I mean, things have to be paid, and I actually prefer the system the church uses. It would be nice if clubs would have it to where you could join the club and then they would just ask you to donate so much per week, but you didn't have to if you didn't have the money. The church has the advantage of, when we have our weekly get-togethers and a lot of the other stuff that goes on, really with very few exceptions, they do nothing but just ask people to give money if they have money to give. And nobody's ever looked down upon or turned down for whatever activity because they don't have the money. And as a matter of fact, even among the stuff that they ask people to pay for to cover the cost, I've actually experienced it myself, to where if somebody doesn't have the money and they just go to the people and say, hey, look, I know you want to sell tickets to a spaghetti dinner or something, my family just doesn't hardly have any money, basically everybody will chip in and we'll cover it for them. So they don't even have to for that. Even where we basically don't just say it's optional, but say we ask for money. If somebody approaches us for even the very few things we do like that, we always make sure it's covered in our church, at least. And a lot of the churches I know, they do that exact same thing. But you have to have a certain amount of money. And in our church, basically my church is the size of about 3,000 people that we have at my church. And if everybody would just chip in a small amount, I mean, it's a ridiculously small amount per person. I think if the average person would chip in like $5, that would pretty much cover everything for us. And asking for an organization that you want their services, no matter what it is, and if people want the church to provide them with education for the kids, baptism, marriage ceremonies, all the different things. I mean, we have, my congregation's largely Hispanic, so they asked the church to set up the facilities for quinceañeras, which is a ceremony for young ladies. So the church provides a lot of stuff. And as a matter of fact, one of the church rules, you're Roman Catholic yourself, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but one of the church rules is you actually can't charge somebody for a sacrament. So if somebody's taking communion, getting married, if somebody's dies in your family and they're being buried in the church actually can't charge for that. They're not allowed to. You can later on put some money in an envelope and give it if you choose, but you don't even have to give it even telling who you are. You can just give it anonymously. Nobody's going to look down on you about that. So, and as far as a church, you also talked about a church acting like a business and actually raising the money. The church has to be kind of careful about doing things like that, because if they do things to make a profit, they lose their total tax-exempt status, so they can't exactly, according to law, if they wish to stay, not just churches, I should say, it's not churches, it's non-profit organizations. Any non-profit organization, if it starts operating like a business, not to mention the fact businesses themselves are going to be the first ones to bitch and moan about the competition. They don't want non-profit organizations competing, because it's only fair if a business has to hire people and pay salaries and do a lot of stuff like they do, and then still try to turn a profit, trying to compete against the non-profit organization just wouldn't really be fair. And the other thing too, a lot of people mention some of the weird things the news media brings up too, like the fact of the electronic Bibles for Haiti, and I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen, but it happens even in non-church or non-Christian settings too, to where people just do ridiculous, silly stuff, and that's the stuff that really gets the news coverage. It's always the ridiculous stuff that gets the news coverage, not the normal everyday stuff. But I see plenty of the normal everyday stuff, and I'm a skeptical person too. We had a guy come and talk at our church a while back about one of those feed the children kind of programs. I'm not even saying that's the exact name, but that's the kind of organization it is, where they ask you, if you wish, throw a little bit of money in the basket for a feed the children type of program. And he claimed that this was independently audited, and it was a Catholic organization. It was independently audited, and it was a few percentage better than even the best of the secular organizations, as far as the amount of your money that actually goes towards food and clothing, rather than any other kind of expenses. So rather than just trust what he said, I actually went online and went to the website that does independent audits on different organizations, and this independent auditing organization, it doesn't cut any slack for anybody. It just basically goes by your financial statements. Every nonprofit organization does have to put out a financial statement of where the money goes and what it goes for, and sure enough, under this independent audit, this one Catholic organization that this guy was asking for donations for, it was actually a couple of percentage better than any other organization at those type of things that feed kids and stuff like that are in disaster areas or poor areas, starving and things like that. So I was rather impressed. I think as you get more involved and really explore it, you're going to find out that there's a lot more to it than what you're really seeing from disgruntled people talking about it, or stuff in the news media that makes the news. The news media would never spend so much as even 15 minutes of time on a news broadcast of how an average church works. They just would not do that, so that's just not possible. But anyway, that's my response. If you want to make another response back or disagree or whatever, I more than welcome anybody that's got a different point of view. I've got friends that are agnostic, atheist, Wiccan. Most of my friends probably have almost no belief system, really. If you asked them, they just wouldn't say they have a belief system. So I always like people giving new thoughts and expressing their opinions on what they believe in and how they believe. So take care.